right, 24 minutes before 11 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. That story out of Flint, Michigan is a scary story with the water being contaminated with lead. Isn't that that's horrible? I mean, that's just so scary. Manley Fuller is on the phone. He's the president of the Florida Wildlife Federation. He's talking to us about the new Clean Water Rule and the Clean Water Act. And it sounds good to me. If we're going to do something to keep the waters clean. Good morning, Manley. How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Pretty good. Where are you calling from?
Tallahassee.
Tallahassee. So it's much colder there than it is here, isn't it?
I don't know.
I'm just teasing.
Usually about maybe 2 degrees or something.
Yeah, I'm just teasing. Yeah, that story out of Flint, Michigan that could have been us. It could have been any place in the country.
Yes, we have, I'm not familiar with the details of the Michigan situation, but, there's a lot of places where there's old pipes with lead, and then, of course, there's a heavy industrial history of that area, which undoubtedly there's some legacy issues with toxics and stuff. And so having the Clean Water Act part of it is intended to address issues just like that.
So once upon a time, when the Industrial Revolution began, I guess we didn't realize that just haphazardly dumping things into the ocean was not a good idea, and probably everybody was guilty of it. And if I had lived back then, I probably would have been guilty of it also. But we know better now, and yet some people still seem to think that it's okay to do. Is that part of the battle? Is to get people to change their minds, or to create legislation so they're forced to change their minds?
Well, the purpose of the Clean Water Act rule was to clarify some muddled Supreme Court decisions from about a decade or more ago regarding the areas of the country where the Clean Water Act applied. And so that's one of the key elements of the Clean Water Act rule, or the Clean Water Rule. And so anyway, the Obama administration, after years of public input and hearings, meetings, put this rule, and then they have adopted it, and it's now has opponents in Congress who are trying to nullify the rule, and undoubtedly President Obama, if they're successful, the opponents of the rule are successful, then he will veto the nullification that Congress might pass. So it gets kind of sticky.
Really?
But essentially what the Clean Water Act does is it protects watersheds. To protect water quality, you need to protect waterways from their source to where they go into the ocean and beyond.
Okay. Does that include runoff from a parking lot?
A runoff from a parking lot. Well, that's a good question. That would depend, I guess, where it was located, and that typically parking lot runoff would not be dealt with through federal permitting. It would be dealt with through local ordinances, local government situations. Now, if it was a huge parking lot and it was discharging directly into waters of the United States, or a new parking lot was put in and involved filling of jurisdictional wetlands, it could very well involve a federal permit.
Okay,
but typically stormwater control off parking lots would be dealt with at the local level.
Okay. Well, the reason I'm asking is because here, for example, in Central Florida, as you know, we have lots of natural springs, and we're constantly being reminded that the water, when we fertilize our lawns, for example, or if the mall fertilizes the lawn, and which has a large parking lot, it could easily run off into the parking lot and then into the area that the water goes to. What is that called next to the mall, Robin? The water,
a retention pond,
whatever it is.
Yeah, retention.
And then
area.
it goes into the aquifer. It seeps in and goes to the aquifer. So ultimately, it does reach the main streams of water, which all lead into the ocean and the Gulf.
Yes, Yes, it's all interconnected, and the Clean Water Act rule allows for dealing with these issues more comprehensively, and than was the case before the rule. And there really were some legal issues that the two Supreme Court decisions that needed clarification, and so that was the origin of the rule. And we've had the Clean Water Act passed in the early '70s, and from the early '70s till the late '90s, before the first of these Supreme Court decisions, you had a definition of the jurisdictional scope of the Clean Water Act. In other words, it went up the streams and the drains a certain distance, and then this that was confused by these two Supreme Court decisions, and this rule clarifies that.
Okay.
Now the total scope of the current rule that EPA is adopting now is slightly different than what it was in the '90s, and they crafted some differences, but it's actually a little slightly smaller than it was back in the '90s. But it does have a lot of opponents who really don't like, who are opposed to federal regulatory programs, and
so
we
okay.
think go ahead.
All right. Well, that's what I want to know. I mean, are they opposed to it simply because they don't like government regulations, or is there something bigger that I don't know if you want to play devil's advocate or not, but what is their argument?
Well, they make arguments that it takes property rights away, that it will have there's a whole cast of horribles that they tout, which we think are either inaccurate or highly questionable, and it's part of it is philosophical, and I think there's a decision by a lot of people that they don't want federal regulations over our waters, and then they say they don't want they want it the state is best to make the decisions, but then we see actions at the state level where the Water Management District's authority is being diminished, and so there's some people that just don't like regulation. But with over 20 million people in Florida now, if we're going to maintain water quality or restore water quality, we've got to have we need a combination of effective regulatory programs with incentive programs to help landowners put in retention areas and things like that. But some people just don't like regulation, and I think it does. It really. Then the result of that will be that we will not. If the result of that would be, if they were successful, that we're just going to have continued degradation of our water quality.
Okay, and that's the way I see it too. I think it is the regulation part, but I'm trying to think of what the argument is in order to play devil's advocate. So let me take a shot at this, and then I want you to argue with me. Not that I'm truly arguing with you, but I wanted to kind of take that side just so I could hear myself say it and see if I can maybe try to understand it. If I have property, let's say I have a farm, and I have a retention area, and that becomes filled with water because of the rains, do I now have to oblige the government, the federal government, because of the fact that I have water on my property?
There are a number of exemptions in the rule for normal agricultural activities. So what we would have to do is take your example, and in other words, it's a little hard to answer your question because there are provisions in the rule which allow a number of exemptions for agricultural activities. But the idea though is it's better to treat and clean water further up in drainage systems than it is to discharge directly into them.
Does it affect? Now, I'm going to bring up a local issue, and I don't know if I'm throwing you a curve, but does it affect something like a dam? We have a dam here that has created a fishing area that the fishing people love, and there's been debate about removing the dam. It's called the Rodman Dam, and if they remove it, then of course everything goes back to the way it was naturally, but at the same time it removes that fishing hole.
Well, I'm very familiar with the debate and have participated in those for a long time over the Rodman Reservoir or the restoration of the Ocklawaha River.
Okay.
And we believe, my organization, the Florida Wildlife Federation, as well as many allies like the Florida Defenders of the Environment, this has been their signature issue for many, many years. We believe that one thing to remember, the Ocklawaha was a great fishery before the reservoir was ever constructed, and we think that under different restoration scenarios, fishing will still be a viable activity, a great activity for people to enjoy. But it's oftentimes the issue gets cast as a fishing anti-fishing, and I think that's a real mistake.
Okay.
But we believe that the restoration could be done in such a fashion that it would not have negative impacts on water quality.
Let's take a little break and we'll be right back. We're talking about the water resources here in Florida. It's something we should all be very, very we should care about it greatly. On the phone to talk to us about this, Manley Fuller up in Tallahassee, the new Clean Water Rule and the Clean Water Act and what it means for all of us. We'll take a break and be right back.
Attention passengers for Flight 1370. The plane has been delayed at its departure point and will be at least 2 hours late. We apologize for any inconvenience.
Are you serious? It took us over an hour to get here, 2 hours going through security and getting our tickets, and now we have to wait another 2 hours.
Yeah, it's beautiful here, but we're inside this overcrowded airport all day because the plane is stuck in bad weather.
This is the last time we ever do this. When we get back, we're going to Ocala Aviation and getting our pilot's license.
Yeah, we've been talking about that long enough. It's about time we did it. Then we can just fly ourselves and never have to deal with this mess again.
Right. No long lines, no full body groping security, no baggage checks.
Not to mention never losing your luggage. Remind me again why we haven't done that?
Well, we're idiots.
Oh, right.
Attention all passengers for Flight 1370. It looks like the plane is going to be delayed a little bit longer. The airline has lost the pilot's luggage. Isn't it time you got your pilot's license? Call Ocala Aviation today. 352-861-7484. That's 352-861-7484. Hey, you've earned it. Call today.
Here's what you may have missed on the John Tesh Radio Show.
Common wisdom suggests we all want partners who are healthy and in shape, but less than 1 out of 10 men and women said they'd actually dump somebody who was too athletic, likely because the perfect physique could signal a vanity problem. Like when you see a friend laughing or crying and you start to laugh or cry too. And now it's been proven dogs have emotional contagion too. Just the sight of devices like Nest Cam and Piper are often enough to scare off crooks who don't want to be caught on camera.
Intelligence for your life on the John Tesh Radio Show. Don't miss this stuff.
Keep up with what's going on in the downtown area with Ocala Downtown Newspaper. Delivering thousands of newspapers to businesses in the downtown area, Ocala Downtown is there to keep you informed. They even have Tom's Picks, a free referral for people who are looking for a company to do work for them. Tom's Picks will refer the company that fits your needs, and all we ask in return is that you tell them where you heard about it. It's simple. For more info, just call Tom's Picks, 352-804-1223, and pick up your copy of the Downtown Ocala newspaper today. Now read Ocala Downtown newspaper online.
WWOCA,
Your source for the #1 sports weekends. Fox Sports, only on 96.3 FM, 1370 AM.
All right, 10 minutes before 11 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. It's sometimes hard when you have an important issue to be able to get the whole scope of it in a small radio interview, but that's what we always try to do. The big thing is to get the tip of the iceberg out there and then give websites. It's the cool marriage between what typical radio is, or traditional radio, and the internet. Manley Fuller is our guest. He's the president of the Florida Wildlife Federation. You know what I've started doing, Rob and I have started doing? We've started hiking. because
That's wonderful.
for our health. Yeah, and so we have, Silver Springs is now a state park. Rainbow Springs has been a state park. So I think we've walked. There's like 5 trails in Silver Springs alone. And I think 2 or 3 of them actually go up against the river. And in Rainbow Springs, there's at least one trail that goes up against the river. And it is just so beautiful to see this, and the water is so beautiful. But yeah, I can remember when I was much younger that there were more fish. It seemed like to me, anyway. I don't know if that's true.
Well, there's the springs that you described, Rainbow and Silver Springs, are just like up where I live, Wakulla Springs, in this part of Florida. They are magnificent, natural treasures, and unfortunately, all of them. And there's, site-specific variation, but essentially all of the springs in the state are being degraded, and they're measurable declines in water quality.
Really?
There's I think Alexander Springs in the Ocala National Forest has had less of that than other places because most of that spring shed is protected, So we've had some degradation. We've had some, exotic plants get in, but essentially, one of the big problems with springs, and it's certainly not the only one, but it's too many nutrients going into them. That's a major problem, and then water withdrawals. So one thing about the fish, I remember as a kid going to Silver Springs and seeing large numbers of fish like striped bass and those are migratory, and actually one of the reasons, a good reason to do the remove Rodman Dam or breach Rodman Dam is that it interferes with the migration of anadromous fish.
And the dam was put there because of the Cross Florida Barge Canal, right? So really,
yes.
It was necessary for that, but not necessary now.
It's not necessary now. It's possible that you could retain a portion of the pool in front of the dam, and you could notch the dam or put a series of weirs in and have river flow restored,
right,
particularly during high water times. That's a possibility. You don't necessarily need to fully remove the entire dam structure. But anyway, opening up the Ocklawaha would allow fish to anadromous fish that go from saltwater to freshwater in their life cycle. It would enable them to go back up to places like Silver Springs.
Right. Okay. And that would change the fish population. Real quick, a curiosity I've always had: if the Cross Florida Barge Canal had been built, would it have ruined the springs as we know them today, the local springs?
It's quite possible that it would have. Well, let's say it would have changed their flow characteristics, because the Cross Florida Barge Canal bisected a lot of the aquifer, the upper portions of the aquifer.
Mm-hmm.
So it certainly would have caused a number of effects. And then when President Nixon canceled it, a lot of that is if the system were operative, I think it would have some effects on groundwater.
Okay, and the lady Marjorie
Carr.
So we really owe her a debt of gratitude, don't we?
Oh yeah, we're proud to have her in our Florida Wildlife Federation Conservation Hall of Fame, along with her husband, Dr. Archie Carr, who is one of the great biologists in Florida history. He was. Both of them were, stars in terms of understanding our environment and our fish and wildlife.
So Florida has a big. We have a big part in this whole issue. Do the congressmen who are opposed to this, are they getting a lot of messages from us Floridians, and is Florida a bigger player than most of the other states?
Well, in the case of the Ocklawaha restoration. The Florida legislature has played an important role in the deliberations about that, and the governor and the cabinet, and that's a very long story. And in fact, you could almost do a program just on that, and I'd be glad to talk with you about that. Your question. Now, the Congress of the United States, in the case of the Cross-Florida Barge Canal, years ago, it was actually federal land, and that was transferred in the early 90s from the federal government to the state government, and now much of that property that you mentioned enjoying hiking, the Cross-Florida Greenway, is located on the site of the old barge canal land.
Yeah. Well, thank you for doing what you're doing and for helping us understand some of these things. What is your hope from the radio tour? Are you hoping for us to, obviously to become more aware? Do you want us to write our congressman or what?
I think it'd be great if your readers could contact their congressional offices and say that that the Clean Water Act rule is desirable, and let it work, and to stop the attempts to derail it. It could be just part of this could just be raw politics, and the people who don't like the current administration would like to have a rule under a administration that they would consider more friendly. But the thing about this is, this wasn't just an overnight decision. There's at least 5 years of work, intensive work with hundreds of thousands of public comments, Lord knows how many public hearings, and overwhelming public support for going forward with this rule. But the opponents are pretty powerful, so that's what we've got. We've got a tug and pull taking place right now.
The websites that were given to me to announce are the Florida Wildlife Federation website, which is fwfonline.org. The National Wildlife Federation is nwf.org. First of all, are they correct, and is there any other website we can announce?
Those are good for now.
Okay, and we will make sure that this interview goes up on the website and Facebook and the YouTube channel as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Manley. Thank you for what you're doing. I mean, it truly is something we have to protect, and thank you for explaining the whole Rodman Dam thing to me.
Please call back if you ever want to do on any other natural resource topics. Glad to provide our thoughts to your listeners.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, we will take a little break, and we'll be right back.
Broadcasting from the Paddock Mall Studios, this is WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
Fox News Radio, I'm Lillian Wu. Defense Secretary Ash Carter announcing another move to take on ISIS.
I've invited defense ministers from all 26 counter-ISIL military coalition nations, plus Iraq, to convene in Brussels in 3 weeks for a first ever discussion among coalition defense ministers.
At a press conference with France's defense minister, those 401ks continue to be worth a lot less today as stocks tumble the Dow down about 400 points in late morning trading. And the so-called affluenza team could be heading for the U.S. soon.
The Mexican attorneys representing Ethan Couch from Texas are dropping their fight against his extradition to the U.S., claiming he might have been taken to Mexico against his will and wasn't fleeing Texas authorities.
Fox Radio's Evan Brown, Fox News. We report, you decide.
Without automatic cloud backup, everything on your computer is at risk. From hackers, viruses, natural disasters, or even the occasional human error. Few things are as bad for business as downtime. So why take the risk? Get Carbonite Cloud Backup and protect all the files that keep your business or your home running smoothly. Start your free trial today at Carbonite.com. No credit card required. Use the offer code INFORMATION to get 2 free bonus months if you decide to buy. That's Carbonite.com. Offer code INFORMATION.
Barry the parrot stared hungrily at his owner as they drove down the freeway.
Patience, Barry, he said to himself. Be patient, but so hungry. Barry do anything for Cracker.
Then something in his little parrot brain snapped. He flew at his owner, pecking at her as if she was one big crumbly cracker. And it was covered, thanks to a farmer's agent. Hangry Parrot, April 14th, 2015. Talk to farmers. We know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two.
We are farmers. Bum, 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 bum.
It's time for Farm and Ranch headlines of the Southeast AgNet. I'm Tyron Spearman reporting. Well, the U.S. farmers had planned to produce more peanuts and sell more abroad, but right now, according to the Foreign Agriculture Service, that is just not happening. Exporting of peanuts during the last 11 months is actually down 3.5% over last